Writers have more stories to tell than those that are written on a page. Join me as I talk about my life, loves, and inspiration behind my work so far, and maybe even a sneak peek into stories yet to come. Hi, I'm Chris Tetralt-Blay, and this is Dead Men Talk. So welcome to another summer drop-in session here on Dead Men Talk, and I'm thrilled to be able to welcome a multi-talented guest today. Chuck Chapman, how are you, sir?
Oh, great, man. How are you, Chris?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Great.
So with yourself, we got talking initially because you've written a marvellous book, which we'll talk about. But also, I'd love to quote this from your website, actually. Because you don't just write. I love this, that you sum yourself up: singer, songwriter, actor, artist, writer, poet, dreamer. Love that. So that pretty much sums it up
pretty well.
So before we delve into your book too much, just so give us a flavour of the other things that you have done up to this point.
I played in touring rock bands for close to 25 years, 30 years. The most successful was a band called the Delilahs back in the 90s. We toured with Peter Frampton, Blue Oyster Cult, Molly Hatchet, the Hooters, before it was a restaurant, when it was a band. I can't remember everybody. Danger, Steve Morse.
That's an impressive list already.
That's one I remember right offhand. It's been 20 years or 15, 20 years. So
Wow.
remember those right offhand when I wasn't prepared for that. It's pretty close, I guess. And then I do independent films, independent B horror movies, maybe even C or D horror movies.
Fantastic.
We have like virtually no budget, so we do the best we can. Our last film was called He Drives at Night. Well, actually, that wasn't our last. Well, yeah, that was our last film. We've done a documentary since then from the Lizzie Borden house, and it's free to watch on YouTube. So just go to the FOAM, FOAM Productions page on YouTube, and we've got a short film up there that's free to watch, and we've got the Lizzie Borden documentary, which has gotten very good reviews. That is free to watch, and then we've got previews, trailers for the other films. Cool. And so He Drives at Night was the last full-length film, and it had Butch Patrick, who was Eddie Munster on the Munsters.
Wow.
So he was co-starring in it and did a great job, of course, and was a big help. And that film got nominated for a Rondo Award, which is kind of, like the horror version of the Grammys or Oscars.
Cool.
So, and we actually got an honorable mention. Didn't win, but got an honorable mention. So for a film that was made on $2,500 budget, I think that's pretty good. And we picked up a distributor, so hopefully it'll be out soon on all the streaming services and Amazon and everywhere else they can get it, I hope. So
brilliant.
It's done fairly well. It won a few film festivals and stuff.
Cool.
Let's see. Yeah, did I cover everything? Oh, and I've been in a few other movies and TV shows, the biggest of which was I had a feature role in Personal Injury Court, which is one of those court TV shows. I played the defendant in one of those, and it was nationally syndicated, so that was pretty cool.
Brilliant. I noticed you shared that on Facebook. I did look for that to see if I could find that myself over here, because I think it's probably just played in America.
Yeah, probably. There's a trailer. There is a trailer. I'll try to find the trailer, because they've got a bunch of their episodes up on YouTube, but they don't have that one. But there is a trailer for it. So
cool.
And then I did some background work in the last Clint Eastwood movie, Richard Jewell, and then I did background work in. I got to remember all this stuff, man. My memory's all fogged up from the COVID junk. So. Actually, Spider-Man Homecoming, I got to work 3 feet from Michael Keaton all day, so it was like a free acting lesson all day. Amazing. And you see the back of my head in the movie. So
Cool.
I made it, but the back of my head made it. I got the most famous back of the head in Hollywood. So.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that to see if I can recognise it. So that's just the stuff before the book that we're about to talk about. So it sounds like you've got enough to fill a series of your own, sort of,
I'll have to keep myself moving.
So then you have written a book called. I'll let you introduce it.
Okay, it's called Family Man: The Unreal Story of Charles Manson's Right-Hand Man.
Yeah. So this had me hooked just from the title, because even though, I mean, obviously as a you don't have to be a horror fan, I suppose, to know about the Manson murders and everything, but there's been a lot of reference to them or homage paid to them in a lot of films along the way. So I knew of them, haven't really delved into the history of it. So I was very intrigued when you mentioned that you'd written this book in particular, because it's like it's an alternate take on it, which after I'm not going to give anything away. You can obviously divulge whatever you want on there, but
a little away. We can't give the big stuff away.
No, but it's such a believable. Even though someone who doesn't know the full history of it, it's such a believable account of it. It's almost eerie when you get to the end of it, and because you are left thinking, how close is this to what could have happened and probably did happen. So I'll leave you introduce the book, and then really sort of how you started, or how you even start to research something like this in as much detail as you did.
Right. I've been interested in the Manson case since I was, I don't know, way too young to have watched or read the books. But when Helter Skelter came on television, I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and my parents let me watch it. And it scared the crap out of me. But it was just so intriguing, and I think why it scared me, because I've always loved horror movies. I mean, even from an early age, and most of the time, none of them really affected me. I mean, Halloween came out in '78. I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I thought it was great. It's my favorite movie ever. But it didn't scare me. I just thought it was a great movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Helter Skelter scared the crap out of me because it was real.
Yeah.
Or at least at that time, the killings were real.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Amityville Horror. Now, over the years, some of that has come out. Some of it's real, maybe some of it's not, whatever. But at the time, you're presented, these are real, true stories. And so the truth to me is always scarier than anything that we can imagine.
Absolutely.
I mean, the things that happen in real life are always worse and scarier than the things we see on a screen or read in a book, to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really got to me. So Helter Skelter, I just had this fascination with. When I saw the TV movie, I then read the book, I think 2 or 3 times in a row, or within a year. And, I believe that story, because why not? This was the prosecutor. Surely if anybody knew the story, it was him.
Yeah.
But then I revisited the book probably 20 years later, and I started thinking, a lot of this doesn't make any sense. A lot of this just doesn't come together right.
Yeah.
And so it milled around in my head for a while. And then a few years later, I started just really digging into it and reading some alternate versions, alternate takes, all of which were supposed to be either documentary or the true versions or documented stuff.
Yeah.
But most of them were just rewrites of Helter Skelter.
Right.
So I started really researching. I spent 8 years researching this case, really not even knowing what I was going to do with it, just from my personal knowledge, because I'm like, it doesn't sound right to me. And so when I started digging in, the further I dug, the more I'm like, there's something else going on here. And so about 2 years ago, I'm like, I think I want to write about this, and tell people the stuff that I've learned. And there's other stuff out there. Nicholas Schreck, if anybody's familiar with him, he was a big help. We kind of Facebook back and forth. And so he gave me some stuff. Of course, I've listened to all of his podcasts, all of his versions, all his stories, some other people that are close to the case, and just started really going, okay, let me tell what I think happened.
Yeah.
And not just what I think happened, but what I feel like I learned happened through not only these books, but also all the interviews with Manson. I think that's a lot of what hooked me is the old Geraldo and Tom Snyder interviews and stuff with Manson.
Yeah.
At first you think, ha, this guy's a nut. But the more you learn about Manson, the guy, not that he wasn't a nut in some ways.
Mm.
I do think, especially later in life, he had some issues. But if you're spending, he grew up in juvenile camps, grew up in prison, basically.
Yeah.
I think he had spent 22 years of his life in boys' homes,
Wow.
juvenile detention centers, or prisons, even before this started.
Yeah.
So the guy had nothing to reference except prison life, institutional living. So when he got turned loose in San Francisco in the summer of love, good Lord, the things he's been dreaming about in prison for 10 years, whatever, boom, there they are. All the girls you want, all the drugs you want, free food, free places to stay,
He's already in a pretty, maybe not warped by some, by some people's descriptions, but he's had a very subjective way of life. He's only familiar with what he knows.
Right, yeah, which is very different than your average, especially young, teenage 18, 20, 21, 22-year-olds, which is who gathered around him, who became his friends, who became what became referred to as the family. Whereas I think I can say, I make it clear in the book, but there wasn't the family. That was created by the media and by the prosecutor to make everything sound sinister and sound like there was a big cult and stuff.
Yeah.
They considered themselves a family because they all lived together. They all worked together. They did everything together. They cared for each other. That's what a family is. But never while they were together did they call themselves the family, as in a specific cult name or group name.
It's amazing what the media can do with something like that. Really.
It is. That case is probably one of the first cases of just the media going wild.
Yeah.
Whereas today, basically every case is a case of the media going wild. But back then, the media had some integrity, and they usually tried to get to the truth, or at least their version of the truth.
Yeah.
And so through this, I've listened to hours and hours of people who were friends with Manson shared their tapes with me that they had made private telephone conversation tapes. So I got a lot of my information came straight from Charles Manson himself through those tapes. And I put it into a context of this character. My main character is fictional. So it's the story of Billy Shepherd, who in its own way is a 60s reference. Yeah. If anybody's familiar with the Paul is Dead Beatles story, which I'm sure you are.
I'm not actually, to be fair.
You're not? Okay. No. There was a rumor in the 60s, which some people still believe, a conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in an automobile crash and replaced by a more talented look-alike. You can look those up. There's some.
I'm right now. That's fascinating.
I don't necessarily believe it, but there's some very compelling videos out there that make you go,
Okay.
So, but supposedly the guy that replaced him, there's a couple of names out there, but one of the names of the new Paul McCartney, quote unquote, was Billy Shepherd.
Okay.
So that's where I pulled the name from, because there's so much Beatles, so much 60s music tied into the story of the Manson situation, Manson family. I'll use family just as the term because everybody's familiar with it. That I thought that it was imperative to use some Beatles references. There's some really cool hidden Beatles references in there, I think, if you look for them. Since you're looking for, they were talking about hidden references in Beatles music, so I threw a few hidden Beatles references throughout the book.
That's cool. I love stuff like that.
Look for them, and we can talk about it after it goes off. I don't want to give it away because I want to make it fun for people if you're looking for those, because there's at least 3 or 4, including Billy Shepherd. So I'll give you that one, because for anybody that's familiar with the Paul is Dead theory, that one's pretty easy.
That's cool. No, I'm definitely going to look more into that. I can't believe I didn't know that, actually. Something that's bypassed me, must admit. But you said that initially you felt that there's something about the original case that wasn't right. What specifically, or was there anything specific that didn't sit right with you that kind of started this whole thing off?
Well, the big part about the mindless robots being sent out to kill, I don't see any way possible that you can tell, 4 or 5 different people, hey, go kill everybody at this house, and they're just going to mindlessly do it. They have, at that time, he didn't go with them. There's, in fact, they admit in the trial, he wasn't at any of the killings.
No.
Yet somehow they convicted him of murder. The fact that they wouldn't let him testify in front of a jury because they thought that he could hypnotize the jury with his eyes and mind control the jury.
Right.
I mean, this is in Helter Skelter. This is part of the original record.
Yeah.
The official record, man. And I'm like, what? That should have been a mistrial right there.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that you have the president of the United States, Richard Nixon, declaring he's guilty in the middle of the trial.
That's to him.
Yeah, and him holding up a paper saying so. They got snuck a paper in somehow, and here he is showing that the president says we're, even the girls came in. The president says we're guilty. We must be guilty. And as far as following him and stuff, I think they looked up to him because he was 33 years old at the time. Most of them are late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
I think they looked up to him and followed him because he had worldly knowledge.
Yeah.
And he was, you're naturally going to gravitate to, if you're in a group, you're almost always going to gravitate to the older person is going to be the de facto leader.
Yeah.
And that's what I think he was. I don't think he was a cult leader. I don't think they were worshiping him or thought he was Jesus Christ or any of that stuff. I think he bought into some of that later just because Charlie liked attention. He liked the publicity of being on these interviews, and who's going to interview you if you're not entertaining?
Yeah.
If he'd sit there and, no, I didn't do it. Nobody cares. But when he's like, I'm to the left and I'm to the right, man, and I'm over here and I'm over there and I'm in your face, man. That's just so much more entertaining than, no, I didn't do it. Yeah. And I think he realized that, and he's like, hey, I can get out of solitary confinement for a while and entertain. Charlie was an entertainer. He was a musician. The Beach Boys thought very highly of him. And, you've read the book.
Yeah.
Beach Boys figure very big into this whole situation.
Yeah.
A lot bigger than most people think.
I didn't know until probably only about sort of 6 months ago, even a year ago, that he was even a musician. I don't know where I read it now, but I then looked his stuff up on Spotify, and I only listened to a few. I mean, it's good stuff. It was odd knowing that had come from him, and
I mean, Dennis Wilson called him the Wizard. I mean, he was just fascinated with him. Neil Young endorsed him. Neil Young thought he would be, Brian Wilson thought he would be the next big thing.
Yeah.
If anybody doubts any of those guys' talent and opinions, hey, I don't know what to tell you. If they thought he was great, who are we to say he wasn't? A lot of people try to put what he was doing then in the context of now.
Yeah.
What he was doing in the late 60s, sounded dated, but it sounded very protesty music. It sounded like Crosby, Stills and Nash to me. It sounded like Bob Dylan to me.
How much of that stuff is still relevant and still, revered today?
Yeah,
it's not famous stuff.
They're revered for what they accomplished.
Yeah,
they're not selling records now.
No.
That doesn't make them any less musicians. In fact, it probably makes them better because to me, the people who are selling records now,
quite
play an instrument.
That's a whole different rabbit hole we could go down.
It really is. Let's not go there.
So what? I mean, just off the top of my head, really, what do you think? Had that not happened, where do you think Charles Manson would have been, sort of today?
I think there was a good chance that Melcher would have pushed him. I don't know how far he would have gone. I'm not sure if you've ever heard any of Terry Melcher's music.
Not familiar with it. No.
Terry Melcher was Doris Day's son. He was a big Hollywood, or not Hollywood. He was a big music producer at the time.
Right.
And that's who they were trying to get to record him. He recorded the Byrds.
Okay.
He recorded their biggest hits. He recorded Paul Revere and the Raiders' biggest hits. So he was a big deal back then.
Yeah.
And so he's the one that lived at Cielo before Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the claims are that he went there to kill them because he was pissed off at Terry Melcher. That's not true. It's been multiple times proven that he and Terry Melcher had a relationship after Melcher had left Cielo.
Right.
He knew Cielo. He knew that Melcher wasn't at Cielo. He knew exactly where Melcher was. He had been to Melcher's house. Melcher had been to the ranch.
Yeah.
They had plenty of opportunities to kill Melcher or put fear into Melcher if they wanted to. So that's, I don't even know where that story comes from. It's just something that, people buy into the helter-skelter myth. And they're really, in the sense that Bugliosi, Silent G, which he was well to point out, Bugliosi used it. There really is no helter-skelter.
No.
Helter-skelter was a thought. Charlie did think that there would be a black-white race war. It got named Helter-Skelter after the Beatles songs. It wasn't even named that by Charlie. It was named that by some of the girls.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So, it wasn't a really big thing to him. Bugliosi himself admits that he doesn't think Charlie really believed it.
No.
So if he doesn't really believe it, then why would he send people out to start it?
Very true.
So all that just stuff, even stuff in the book contradicts itself.
Yeah.
Linda Kasabian, who became the star witness, who was there at both killings, at Cielo and at Waverly the next night, Linda Kasabian says, like 2 paragraphs away from each other, she was afraid. They asked, why did you not leave as soon as they killed the people at Cielo? Well, I was afraid they would harm my daughter, who was at the ranch. Well, she left a few days after the second killing and left her daughter at the ranch. And said, well, why did you leave her at the ranch? Oh, well, I knew she would be okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's a contradiction right there in the same book, just a few paragraphs apart.
Does discredit it somewhat. Yeah.
And it's like that all the way through. There's tons of places where it will say one thing and then it'll come back and say something totally opposite just a few chapters or even sometimes a few paragraphs later.
Yeah.
So, you start seeing that, and then you start listening to the Manson interviews, and you start listening to what other people have to say, and you start putting it together. I got crime scene photos. I got autopsy reports. I got the original copies of the original police reports and the updated police reports. So I went a lot on what the police were pursuing before this helter-skelter stuff came into it at the trial. And what the police were pursuing had nothing to do with helter-skelter or cults or anything like that. And that's what we talk about in the book.
Yeah.
Billy tells, he's Charlie's best friend. He's Charlie's right-hand man, which Charlie really didn't have. Everybody assumed different people were Charlie's right-hand man. And Charlie would tell anybody anything they wanted to hear. And this was his whole life, because that's how you got by. That's how you survived in jail.
Yeah.
You told people what they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So if Tex comes up and goes, hey, Charlie, are you my, am I your best friend? Yeah, man, you're my best friend. Well, if Paul Watkins comes up and says, hey, Charlie, I'm your best friend, right? Charlie's, yeah, Paul, you're my best friend. You're my man. So all of them thought they were Charlie's right-hand man, but he really didn't trust any of them.
No.
Charlie didn't trust anybody. So I make Billy, who gets nicknamed Shep, because everybody in the family had a nickname. I made Billy the right-hand man that all the other people thought they were, and that I think Charlie really wanted, but never really had. So I use a lot of conversation between Charlie and Billy, or Charlie and Shep. I need to just call him Shep because that's what I call him through 90% of the book. So I'll use a lot of conversation between Charlie and Shep to explain Charlie's real feelings and Charlie's thoughts on things. And as often as possible, now obviously those conversations never happened, but through pieces of conversations with other people that I've heard Charlie have, a ton of the Charlie quotes in that book are actually his exact words.
I find that quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of Charlie, not everything. Some of it, like when he and Shep meet, obviously I had to make up that whole scenario.
Yeah.
But I tried to use terms that I thought Charlie would use through listening to probably between interviews, phone conversations, documentaries and stuff, watching his mannerisms, listening to his speech patterns. I tried to say what I thought Charlie would say in those situations. But I would say probably at least probably 60 to 70% of Charlie's speech in my book are actual quotes of Manson himself.
I personally, it's that level of research and perception on your part that makes this book so credible. because and it's knowing that. Well, first of all, a lot of it in there is based on reality, and you're kind of trying to figure out which the fictional parts are because so much of it seems so real. Did you have, going back to Shep as a character, did you have someone in particular in mind that inspired him, or is he an amalgamation of multiple people?
Shep was a combination of 4 or 5 of the guys there that were fairly close to Charlie.
Mm.
And some of him was just, I tried to give him his own personality, which I probably patterned after myself in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So I tried to give him the independent thoughts and stuff that he had. Of course, I didn't know what those guys' thoughts were, so that probably came from me. But some of it came from Tex Watson, some of it came from Paul Watkins, some of it came from T.J. Wallerman, some of it came from Bobby Beausoleil. So kind of all those guys combined, plus my personality in there with him is what created Shep.
Yeah, cool.
And I think as far as what's fictional, what's truth, basically the story itself is truth, in my opinion, and through my research. The way I describe the murders, the way I describe what leads up to the murders, the way I describe what happens after the murders are all, like I said, through my research and through my opinion, are all fact. Yeah. The only thing that's really fictional is the Shep timeline, the Shep participation in those things. Yeah. So that's why I consider it historical fiction. Some of the things I had that I chose to use, I could not corroborate. I had from one source, but I couldn't corroborate. To me, if they made sense, if they fit the story, I used them anyway.
Yeah, fair enough.
I tried to corroborate as much as I could, but again, this is not a nonfiction account. This is not a news story. So everything wasn't corroborated, but everything that happened that was related to Manson or the family, to me, is truth.
Yeah.
The only things really fictional are Shep's parts in it.
And you obviously needed that as a vessel to kind of tell the story, so that makes perfect sense, you know.
It had never been done that I'm aware of, and that most of the people I talked to was aware of. It had never been done in sort of a novelization. Everything had been more documentation. And so to me, if you don't know anything about Manson, this is still an enjoyable story. If you think you know everything about Manson, this is probably going to shake your world up a little bit, but I think it's still going to be an enjoyable story. My wife, who couldn't care less about Manson, cried at the end because she cared so much about Shep.
Yeah. And that's powerful, and that's what you want as a writer. That's when you know really that you've done your job. You know, as a horror writer, I suppose when I get people, not that many of them, but when I do get people sort of comment on the if they felt fear or something, or they've had to read one of the stories with the light on or something, perfect. You know, that's exactly what I'm after. So that actually goes on quite nicely to what I was going to use as my sort of main question is your vision for this book. What would you like to achieve with it? Would you like it to be accepted as a sort of a standalone work of fiction, or do you really want to try and change people's opinions or awareness of what you think actually happens? Cool.
Honestly, both, I would say. Or at least, even if I don't change their opinions, I want them to look into it for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I want them to say, okay, you know, let's see if I can find documentation for this. And a lot of it, they're going to be able to. You know, a lot of it's out there. So that was, the main thing is that I wanted to do something that hadn't been done with the story, present it in a whole new way. But like I said, there's people out there who have told similar stories. Most of my ideas aren't new. I mean, everything out there I documented. You know, I wanted to tell the true story, so I had to find stuff or people that could tell me these things. Yeah. Whether it be websites, interviews. I interviewed a lot of people. A lot of people helped me out a lot. They were very willing to talk to me. Some wouldn't talk to me. One of the main characters in the book, I tried to contact, and they would not get back with me. So I kind of had to portray them the way other people told me they were. You know, if they have a beef with it, I did try to get in touch.
Yep. Feel free. They'll probably get in touch now when they got a problem with it.
Right. I tried to get it straight from you, so you wouldn't tell me your version. So I had to get people that said they knew you or knew what happened.
There you go.
So, and Manson was for the most part, Manson's very honest.
Mm.
A lot of people think he's just a raving lunatic and stuff, but a lot of the things he would do in his interviews when he did the hand signals and stuff, he was sending signals to people he knew.
Right.
He would get letters in prison or whatever, and I'll put that reference in there. I don't think that's giving anything away that Shep writes him a letter when he's in prison.
Right.
And of course, Shep's at this point not anywhere near California, and Charlie can't respond, but Charlie responds for the hand signal that he and Shep used together.
Yeah.
So Shep knows that Charlie got his correspondence. Yeah. And he really did that with, several people. He would send them, messages when he's doing all this, crazy stuff that people think, oh, he's just doing crazy stuff. He's sending messages to people, whether it be, hey, write me a letter, send me some money.
Yeah.
I got your letter, whatever. He's communicating with people.
It's when you learn stuff like that, you realize how smart he was. Like you say, people jump on the bandwagon and think he's just a madman, but everything he was doing actually had a purpose. That's very intelligent.
Yeah, but the main thing I want to get across to people is that I feel like Charlie was kind of used as a scapegoat.
I was going to ask you that earlier on. Do you think it was just a bit of a sort of blame culture? We need to pin this on someone.
Well, and someone who looked evil.
Yeah.
Someone who, they use that famous picture of him when he's all bugged out, his eyes are bugged out and stuff. What they don't realize is he was just coming off an LSD trip. Mm. When they take that picture, so he's all crazy, and that's the picture everybody goes by. Yeah. There's tons more pictures out there where he doesn't, he looks like a normal guy.
The actual, finishing, just before we tie it up, just sort of the actual writing of the book. You mentioned it took you about like 8 years or so of research.
Well, it took me 8 years research.
How long then, when you decided you were going to put it together as a book, how long did that process take?
About 8 months.
Okay.
8 or 9 months.
Yeah. That's still a chunk of time, and when you consider nearly 9 years devoted, from start to finish, really with this. That's what, again, I keep raving about it. It's one of the best books I've read for a long time. I love, finding new writers. That's what I love about the writing community. You get to discover people for yourself who otherwise you probably wouldn't have found out about, and you find that their work is incredible and you just want to talk about it. So it's great to have you on here to talk about it. I implore all the listeners to hunt this book out. When is it due out?
As of right now, we're tentatively for September.
Cool.
So it'll be coming soon. All the final edits are done. Right now I'm waiting on them to send me the cover for final approval.
Cool.
And after that, I think we're done. All our Library of Congress stuff's taken care of, our ISBN numbers. So we're really, really close.
Brilliant.
So the target's September right now.
Cool.
You can find it on Facebook at Family Man Book, just at Family Man Book. You should be able to find it. Or Family Man, The Unreal Story of Charles Manson's Right-Hand Man. Cool. And then it'll be available everywhere when it comes out. It's on Black Bedsheet Books. So you can find it on blackbedsheetbooks.com. You can find it on my website, chuckwchapman.com. You'll be able to find it on the Phone Productions page. Obviously, it'll be Amazon.
I'm predicting at some point it'll be everywhere. I think it'll be one of the books once it gets out there and people start reading it. It'll be a real talking point. So
well, I hope so. And thank you for the compliment, Chris. That means so much.
No problem. Thank you for letting me let me read it ahead of time. I think I feel very privileged.
Yeah, you're one of the 3 people that I sent advance copy.
Yeah, there you go. I feel special. No, I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see it out there. I mean, you don't. The book, people always say you don't judge a book by its cover, but I can't wait to see what the finished product looks like, because I think.
Oh, me too. I sent in what I wanted it to look like, but
that's
what it's going to come out looking like. So the publisher makes that final decision.
They do.
I know. Really appreciate that because I enjoy your work.
Thank you.
I really do. So that coming from somebody you respect and you enjoy their work, then it does mean a lot.
Thank you. Oh yeah. In terms of sort of, have you got any like promote? I know it's probably difficult at the minute. Any promotional activities lined up, or any particular vessels you're going to use to really sort of push the book when it's out that you know of?
Well, obviously my Facebook page for the book. Um, I'm sure the publisher will do some stuff. He hasn't told me what yet. I'll be doing book signings at least around the southeastern United States.
Cool.
Obviously, COVID's kind of restricting things right now.
Yeah.
So not sure how many of those I'll be able to do. I will be making signed copies available again. I don't know what international shipping would be. In the US, it'll be $25, and that's for the signed copy, postpaid, and everything.
Cool.
The Amazon retail is going to be $14.98.
Cool.
So your bookstore retail should be $14.98. Like I said, if you want a signed copy, probably somewhere $20 plus shipping. Whatever shipping is international, I haven't checked.
Bargain. I would say bargain. That's yeah, no, all the best. I can't wait for the world to return to rights. You know, I had got some. I'm just getting started with one of my books and actually being able to make public appearances and public readings, and then this comes along and wrecks it all. So
horror cons, I love doing horror cons.
Okay, cool.
You know, and so that was really one of my major. You know, I want to do the horror cons.
Yeah.
Because I do them to promote the movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So we always have tables at horror cons, and right now there are no horror cons.
No.
Online's not going to sell me a lot of books.
That's the thing. It just seems to be. I know they've got to take precautions and everything. It just seems to be that the entertainment and the arts industries are bottom of the list. You know, there's a lot of people out there that need to get back out there, and
exactly.
You know,
if it's not hurting Kiss and Metallica, it's hurting guys like us.
Yeah.
You know, we guys, if that's the way you say it, us guys, whatever.
Yeah.
That would, need to be out in public so people can meet us, can see our book, can shake our hand. When we can shake hands again, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We need that contact.
Yeah.
To help us get our product out, and it's killing us. Small bands.
Yeah.
Small businesses, the independent authors, you name it. All of us guys at the bottom, and it's hurting us bad.
It is.
But those guys that make millions, they're just cruising in their mansion.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're not really hurting bad.
Not really. But fingers crossed. Next year, it's all meant to get better. Apparently, we'll see. Everyone does their part. Hopefully, we will.
It could be when it's released. It should be available everywhere.
Cool.
Even your local bookstore should be able to get it because they should have it in their listings and stuff. They may not have it on their shelves, but they should be able to get it for you. Like I said, straight through Amazon.
Cool.
Amazon or Black Bed Sheets is going to be your straight unless you want it. If it comes through me, then that's why it costs a little more because I personally have to sign the book and I'll sign it however anybody wants.
That's cool. That's
I mean, no swastikas or anything.
You'll get some. I reckon you'll get some interesting requests. I'm sure.
But I'll sign it however anybody wants to, and just the fact that I have to get them to ship the books to me.
Yeah.
Then I pull them out, I sign them, I repackage them, I ship them out. I'm not really. I'm getting $10 for that, and the shipping's probably 5 or 6 of it.
Yeah. You're gonna have a happy customer at the end of it, and that's
what we'll and I'll have them on eBay, same thing.
Cool.
The signed version. So there'll be plenty of outlets for it.
There we go. So yes, listeners, anyone listening to this, Family Man, look it up. Go on Chuck's pages. When the book's out, buy a copy. You will not regret it. It's a brilliant piece of work. So thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing being able to talk to you finally. So,
thank you so much for it.
No worries.
I really appreciate it, man. Really.
No worries. Well, all the best with everything, and keep in touch. Hopefully, have you back on one day, and when it's out, and catch up again and sort of see what else lies ahead for you.
That sounds great, man.
Cool. Thank you, bud.
All right. Thank you.
See you. Cheers, mate. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at ChrisTBAuthor to keep updated about all future shows.